My wife cheating, called me clingy, and came home reeking of another man. I gathered proof, cut off all money, filed for divorce, and took back my house. You actually give a damn about your relationship. When you ask questions, when you notice changes, when you refuse to pretend everything's fine while your wife starts treating you like you're some annoying stranger who wandered into her life. That's exactly what she called me last Wednesday night, plenty. Right after I asked her why she'd been coming home at midnight 3 times that week, smelling like she'd bathed in someone else's cologne. Get out of my face. I'm tired of your clingy behavior, she snapped, not even looking up from her phone, the same phone she'd been glued to for weeks, typing messages she'd quickly hide whenever I walked into the room. I stood there in our kitchen, watching this woman I'd been married to for 6 years talk to me like I was some pest she wanted to swat away. The disrespect was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Clingy, I repeated, keeping my voice level. Asking my wife where she's been until midnight is clingy now? She finally looked up, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Pure contempt, not anger, not frustration, contempt. Yes, it's clingy. It's suffocating. I'm a grown woman. I don't need to report my every move to you like some teenager with a curfew. The way she said it, with that dismissive little laugh at the end, told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't about me being clingy. This was about her wanting complete freedom to do whatever she wanted, with whoever she wanted, while I played the role of the oblivious husband at home. I could have gotten angry. I could have raised my voice, demanded answers, started a screaming match that would have accomplished nothing. Instead, I did something that clearly caught her off guard. I smiled. You're absolutely right, I said, walking over to the refrigerator and grabbing a bottle of water. You are a grown woman, and grown women face grown-up consequences for their choices. That wiped the smug expression right off her face. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm done being clingy, I said, taking a long drink of water while maintaining eye contact. From now on, you have all the space you could ever want. She stared at me for a moment, probably trying to figure out if this was some kind of trap. When I didn't elaborate, she shrugged and went back to her phone. Good. Maybe now we can have some peace around here. Peace. As if the tension in our house was my fault. As if I was the one who'd started coming home late, being secretive, and treating my spouse like an inconvenience. But here's the thing about giving someone exactly what they asked for. Sometimes they don't realize what they're actually asking for until it's too late. Over the next few days, I watched her carefully, not because I was being clingy, but because I was gathering information. She thought she'd won some kind of victory, that she'd successfully trained me to stop asking questions and just accept whatever scraps of attention she felt like throwing my way. She had no idea that she'd actually done me a favor. She'd shown me exactly who she really was, and more importantly, she'd given me permission to stop pretending I didn't see it. The late nights continued. The secret phone calls continued. The complete lack of respect for our marriage continued. But now, instead of confronting her about it, I was documenting it, taking notes, paying attention to patterns. Because if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's that when someone shows you who they really are, you should believe them. And when they disrespect you to your face and tell you to get out of theirs, well, sometimes the best response is to give them exactly what they're asking for, just not in the way they expect. By Friday night, she was practically glowing with satisfaction. She thought she'd successfully trained me to be the quiet, compliant husband who didn't ask inconvenient questions. She waltzed out of the house at 9 p.m., dressed like she was going to a nightclub instead of wherever she claimed to be going. Don't wait up, she called over her shoulder, not even bothering to lie about where she was going anymore. I wouldn't dream of it, I replied from the living room, not looking up from the legal documents I was reviewing on my laptop. She paused at the door, probably wondering what I was reading, but her phone buzzed and distracted her. Off she went into the night, leaving me alone with my thoughts and my plans. See, she thought getting out of her face meant I'd become invisible. What she didn't realize was that invisible people see everything. And sometimes when you tell someone to get out of your face often enough, they start thinking about whose face should be getting out of whose house. The beautiful thing about being called clingy is that it gives you the perfect excuse to stop caring. At least that's what she thought would happen. What actually happened was much more interesting. Saturday morning, she slept until noon. When she finally stumbled into the kitchen, looking like she'd been hit by a truck, I was already dressed and finishing my coffee. "Where are you going?" she asked, squinting at me through what was obviously a massive hangover. "Out," I said, grabbing my keys, the same tone she'd been using with me for weeks. For the first time in months, I saw uncertainty flash across her face. Out where? I paused at the door and looked back at her. Hair a mess, makeup smeared, wearing the same dress from last night. This was the woman who'd called me clingy for asking basic questions about her whereabouts. "I'm a grown man," I said, using her exact words from Wednesday night. "I don't need to report my every move like some teenager with a curfew." The look on her face was priceless. Pure confusion mixed with the dawning realization that her own words were being used against her. I spent the day actually running errands I'd been putting off. Bank, lawyer's office, a few other stops that would prove very useful later. But I also did something else. I started paying attention to details I'd been too trusting to notice before, like how our joint credit card statements showed charges at restaurants I'd never been to during times she claimed to be working late, or how the mileage on her car didn't match up with her stories about where she'd been, or how she'd suddenly become very interested in going to the gym, but never seemed to lose any weight or gain any muscle. When I got home that evening, she was pacing the living room like a caged animal. The moment I walked in, she pounced. "Where have you been all day? I've been trying to call you." I pulled out my phone and saw 12 missed calls. 12. From the woman who'd told me I was being clingy for asking one simple question about her schedule. My phone was on silent, I said, which was true. I was busy. Busy doing what? The irony was so thick you could swim in it. But instead of pointing that out, I decided to have a little fun. "Adult things," I said, walking past her toward the stairs. "Grown-up business. Nothing you need to worry about." She followed me upstairs, and I could practically feel the frustration radiating off her. This wasn't how the script was supposed to go. In her mind, she was supposed to be the mysterious one with secrets while I sat at home like a loyal dog waiting for her return. "We need to talk," she said as I started changing clothes. "About what? About us. About what's been happening lately." I turned to look at her, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her almost. She genuinely looked confused, like she couldn't understand why her behavior had consequences. "What's been happening is exactly what you asked for," I said, pulling on a fresh shirt. "You wanted space. You wanted me to stop being clingy. You wanted me out of your face. Congratulations, you got it. But this isn't what I meant. Then you should have been more specific." That night, she tried every manipulation technique in the book. She attempted to start a fight, hoping I'd get emotional and give her an excuse to storm out again. When that didn't work, she tried being affectionate, suddenly interested in spending time together after weeks of treating me like I had the plague. None of it worked because I wasn't playing her game anymore. Instead, I sat in my home office going through bank statements, phone records, and other documents that painted a very clear picture of what my wife had been up to. Every late night, every mysterious phone call, every unexplained expense, it was all there, forming a pattern that would have been obvious if I hadn't been so focused on trying to save a marriage that she'd already abandoned. The phone records were particularly enlightening. Hundreds of texts and calls to a number I didn't recognize, always late at night, always when she claimed to be working or out with friends. The calls lasted hours sometimes, which explained why she'd been so tired and irritable during the day. But the real goldmine was her social media activity. She thought she was being careful, but privacy settings only work if you remember to use them consistently. Her posts told a story of a woman living a completely different life than the one she presented at home. Pictures at bars and clubs I'd never heard of, tagged with people I'd never met, wearing outfits I'd never seen. In one photo from 2 weeks ago, she was wearing a necklace I definitely hadn't bought her, a very expensive-looking necklace that someone clearly had bought her, someone who wasn't her husband. By Sunday night, I had a complete picture of her double life. The question wasn't whether she was cheating anymore. The question was how long it had been going on and how much of our marriage had been a lie. She came home around 11, earlier than usual. Maybe the guilt was finally getting to her, or maybe whoever she'd been with had other plans. She found me in the living room reading a book like nothing had happened. "Hey," she said, trying to sound casual. "How was your day?" "Productive," I replied without looking up. "Very productive." She stood there for a moment, probably trying to figure out what that meant. Then she sat down on the opposite end of the couch as far from me as possible while still being in the same room. "Listen, about the other night. Maybe I was a little harsh. A little harsh." That's what she called it, not disrespectful, not cruel, not completely inappropriate. A little harsh. "Don't worry about it," I said, finally looking up at her. "You were just being honest about how you feel. I appreciate honesty." The word honesty hit her like a slap. She flinched, actually flinched. And I knew she was thinking about all the lies she'd been telling. "Good," she said after a pause. "I'm glad we understand each other." "Oh, we understand each other perfectly," I said, going back to my book. "Better than you realize." Monday evening changed everything. She came home around 7:30 and found me at the kitchen table with a folder full of papers spread out in front of me. "What's all this?" she asked, trying to sound casual, but I caught the nervous edge in her voice. "Just some reading material," I said, not looking up from the phone records I was reviewing. "Very interesting stuff." She moved closer, and I watched her face change as she recognized what she was seeing. Bank statements, credit card bills, phone records, screenshots of social media posts, all organized in neat piles with dates and times highlighted. What the hell is this? The casualness was gone now, replaced by barely controlled panic. "This is what happens when you tell your husband to get out of your face," I said, finally looking up at her. "He stops bothering you with questions and starts finding his own answers." She grabbed the phone records first, scanning through the highlighted numbers with growing horror. "You had no right to go through my private." I interrupted, my voice calm but cold. "These aren't your phone records, these are our phone records, from the family plan that I pay for every month." I picked up a restaurant receipt and held it up. "Dinner for 2 at Romano's. Last Tuesday, the same night you told me you were working late and grabbed a sandwich at your desk." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "I can explain." "Oh, I'm sure you can. You've gotten very creative with your explanations lately." I picked up another paper. "Like this jewelry purchase, $300 for a necklace, the same necklace you wore in that photo with your arms around some guy I've never met." The color drained from her face. She hadn't expected me to find her social media activities. "That's not what it looks like," she said weakly. "Really? Because it looks like you've been living a completely different life behind my back. It looks like you've been lying to me every single day for months." I stood up, gathering the papers into a neat stack. "But please, tell me what it actually looks like. I'm dying to hear your version." She tried the anger approach first. "How dare you spy on me? This is a violation of my privacy." "Your privacy?" I laughed, and the sound seemed to make her take a step back. "You lost your right to privacy the moment you decided to cheat on your husband with our money." When anger didn't work, she switched to tears. "Please, you don't understand. It's not what you think." "Then explain it. Explain the secret phone calls that last for hours. Explain the charges at hotels I've never been to." The tears dried up quickly when she realized they weren't working either. That's when she tried the nuclear option, blame reversal. "This is exactly why I needed space," she said, her voice rising. "You're controlling and possessive, and you're driving me away." "Controlling?" I set the papers down and looked at her with genuine amusement. "Lady, if I was controlling, you wouldn't have been able to carry on this affair for 3 months without me saying a word." 3 months. I watched her face when I said it, and the guilty flinch told me I'd guessed correctly. "If I was possessive, you wouldn't have had the freedom to stay out until midnight 3 times a week. And if I was the problem, you would have asked for a divorce instead of making a fool out of me." She opened her mouth to argue, but I held up my hand. "But here's the thing. I'm not going to stand here and listen to you blame me for your choices. You want to know why you felt like you needed space? Because you were living a double life, and the guilt was eating you alive." The fight went out of her completely. She slumped into a chair, finally understanding that her usual manipulation tactics weren't going to work this time. "What do you want?" she asked quietly. "What do I want?" I repeated the question, tasting the irony. 3 days ago, you told me to get out of your face. You made it very clear that you were tired of my presence in your life. So, I'm going to give you exactly what you asked for. What does that mean?" I picked up a business card from the table and handed it to her. "That's my lawyer's card. He's expecting your call." She stared at the card like it was a snake. "You're not serious. Deadly serious. You wanted me out of your face? Consider it done. But there's just one small problem with your request." I leaned forward, making sure she was looking directly at me. "This is my house. My name is on the deed. I've been making the mortgage payments, so if someone's face is leaving, it's not going to be mine." The reality of her situation was finally starting to sink in. All those months of treating me like I was the problem, and she'd never once considered that I might decide I'd had enough. "You can't just kick me out," she said, but there was no conviction in her voice. "I'm not kicking you out. I'm giving you what you asked for. Freedom from my clingy behavior. space from my suffocating presence, relief from having to look at my face. I gathered up all the evidence and put it back in the folder. The only difference is that you'll be getting all of that somewhere else. She sat there in stunned silence, probably trying to figure out how her perfect plan had gone so wrong. She'd thought she could have her cake and eat it too. "This is crazy," she said finally. "We can work this out. We can go to counseling." "Counseling?" I almost laughed. "You want to go to counseling now? After months of lying, cheating, and treating me like I was some kind of burden?" I closed the folder and stood up. "Here's the thing about counseling. It's for people who want to fix their problems. You don't have a problem. You have a choice. And you made it a long time ago." "Please," she said, and for the first time she sounded genuinely desperate. "Don't throw away everything we had." "I'm not throwing anything away," I said, walking toward the stairs. "You already did that. I'm just cleaning up the mess you left behind." As I reached the top of the stairs, I heard her call out one last time. "Where am I supposed to go?" I paused and looked back at her, sitting alone at the kitchen table where she'd told me to get out of her face just days earlier. "I don't know," I said, "but I'm sure you'll figure it out. After all, you're a grown woman." Remember Tuesday morning? She was still there when I came downstairs for coffee, sitting at the same kitchen table, looking like she hadn't slept at all. The folder of evidence was gone, probably hidden somewhere she thought I wouldn't find it again. "We need to talk," she said as I poured my coffee. "No, we don't." I didn't even look at her. "You have my lawyer's card. Everything we need to discuss can go through him. Please, just listen to me for 5 minutes." I turned around and leaned against the counter, checking my watch. 5 minutes. Go. She took a deep breath, and I could see her mentally preparing the speech she'd probably rehearsed all night. "I made mistakes. I know that, but we can fix this. We've been together for 6 years. That has to count for something." "It did count for something," I said, "right up until you decided to throw it away for whatever his name is." Her face flushed. She hadn't expected me to know there was a specific person. "It's not about him. It's about us, about problems we've been having." "What problems?" I asked, genuinely curious. "The problem where I worked every day to pay for this house? The problem where I respected you enough to trust you? Or the problem where I asked you basic questions about your schedule like a normal husband would?" She stumbled over her words, trying to find some justification that would make sense. "We grew apart. We weren't connecting anymore." "We grew apart because you were connecting with someone else," I said, finishing my coffee. "Don't try to rewrite history now that you've been caught." I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. She followed me, desperation creeping into her voice. "Where are you going?" "To work." "You know that thing I do to pay for the life you've been taking for granted. When will you be back?" I stopped and looked at her, really looked at her. 3 days ago, this woman had told me to get out of her face. Now she was asking about my schedule like she had some right to know. "I'll be back when I'm back. You're a grown woman, remember? Figure it out." At work, I made the calls I'd been putting off. First to the bank to remove her access to our joint accounts. Then to the credit card companies to cancel the cards she'd been using to finance her affair. Then to my lawyer to get the ball rolling on paperwork that would make everything official. Each call was a small victory. Each canceled card, each removed authorization, each legal document filed was me taking back control of my life. My phone started buzzing around noon. Text after text from her asking what I'd done, demanding I call her back, threatening to come to my office. I let them pile up without responding. She wanted space. She was getting it. When I finally got home that evening, I found her in the living room with 2 suitcases packed. "There," she said, gesturing at the luggage. "Are you happy now?" "Actually, yes. I'm happier than I've been in months." That clearly wasn't the response she was expecting. She probably thought the sight of her packed bags would make me emotional, maybe even beg her to stay. "I called him," she said, trying to sound defiant. "He said I can stay with him until we figure this out." "Good for you. I hope you two are very happy together." She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "That's it? That's all you have to say?" "What did you expect? Tears? Begging? You've been planning this for months. The only difference is now you're being honest about it." I walked past her toward the kitchen, and she followed me again. "You're making a huge mistake," she said. "You're going to regret this." "The only mistake I made was trusting you," I said, opening the refrigerator. "And the only thing I regret is not seeing through your lies sooner." She stood there for a moment, probably waiting for me to break down or change my mind. When neither happened, she tried one last manipulation. Fine, but don't come crying to me when you realize what you've lost. I turned around and smiled at her, a real smile, not the fake ones I'd been giving her for weeks. What I've lost is a wife who treated me like garbage, lied to my face every day, and spent our money on another man. If that's what you call a loss, then I'm the luckiest man alive. Her face went through about 5 different emotions in the span of 2 seconds. Shock, anger, hurt, confusion, and finally something that might have been respect. "You're not the same person I married," she said quietly. "You're absolutely right," I said. "The person you married would have begged you to stay, would have blamed himself for your choices, would have spent months in therapy trying to figure out what he did wrong." I leaned against the counter, completely relaxed, but that person was married to someone who respected him. The person standing in front of me now, she told me to get out of her face and called me clingy for caring about my own marriage. I gestured toward her suitcases. "So congratulations. You got exactly what you wanted. No more clingy husband asking inconvenient questions. No more suffocating marriage holding you back. No more my face in your business." She picked up her bags, and for a moment I thought she might actually leave without another word. But she stopped at the door and looked back. "What if I want to come back? Then you'll want in one hand and spit in the other," I said. "See which one fills up first." She stood there for another few seconds, probably hoping I'd crack. When I didn't, she opened the door. "This isn't over," she said. "Yes, it is," I replied. "It's been over for months. You just didn't bother to tell me." The door closed behind her, and for the first time in half a year, my house was actually peaceful. No tension, no lies, no walking on eggshells around someone who'd made it clear she didn't want me there. I poured myself a drink and sat down in my living room. My living room in my house with my name on the deed. She'd wanted me out of her face. Mission accomplished. Too bad for her that getting out of her face meant she had to get out of my house. 3 weeks later, she showed up at my door on a Thursday night. I opened it to find her standing there with red eyes and a desperate expression I'd never seen before. "We need to talk," she said, trying to push past me into the house. I blocked her path. "No, we don't. Everything goes through lawyers now, remember? Please, just 5 minutes. Things didn't work out the way I thought they would." "What a surprise," I said, not moving from the doorway. The man who was willing to sleep with someone else's wife turned out to be unreliable. Who could have seen that coming? Her face crumpled. "He kicked me out, said he wasn't ready for anything serious." I almost laughed. "Let me guess. It was all fun and games when you were sneaking around, but when you showed up with suitcases, suddenly he remembered he values his freedom." "It's not funny," she snapped, but there was no real fire behind it. She looked exhausted. "You're right, it's not funny, it's predictable." I leaned against the door frame. "What exactly did you think was going to happen? That he'd welcome you with open arms after you left your husband for him?" I thought she started, then stopped. "I thought he cared about me. He cared about the thrill of the affair. He cared about having someone else's wife on the side. He didn't care about actually dealing with the consequences of breaking up a marriage." She stood there for a moment, probably realizing how completely she'd misjudged the situation. "I made a mistake," she said quietly. "A huge mistake. I want to come home." "This isn't your home anymore," I said simply. "You gave up that right when you decided our marriage was something you could throw away for a few months of excitement." "But I love you," she said, and for the first time tears started falling. "I never stopped loving you." "No, you didn't love me. You loved the security I provided. You loved having a husband to fall back on while you explored your options. You loved knowing I'd be here waiting like a faithful dog while you had your fun." I straightened up, making it clear the conversation was over. "But love, real love, doesn't treat people the way you treated me. Real love doesn't lie every single day for months. Real love doesn't call someone clingy for caring." "I was confused," she said desperately. "I was going through something and I handled it wrong. But we can fix this." "There's nothing to fix. You weren't confused. You were selfish. You wanted everything your way, and you thought you could manipulate me into accepting whatever scraps you felt like giving me." I could see her trying different approaches, looking for the angle that would work. But she was dealing with a different person now. The man she'd married would have been overjoyed to hear her say she wanted to come back. The man standing in front of her had learned some hard lessons about self-respect. "What about forgiveness?" she asked. "What about second chances?" "Forgiveness is for people who are sorry for what they did, not sorry they got caught. And second chances are for people who deserve them." She tried to step closer, but I moved back. You had your chance. You had 6 years of chances. You used every single one of them to lie to me, disrespect me, and cheat on me. So, that's it? You're just going to throw away everything we had? The irony was so perfect it was almost beautiful. Not throwing away anything. You already did that. Remember, you threw it away the first time you went to dinner with him. You threw it away every time you lied about where you were. You threw it away when you told me to get out of your face. I started to close the door. The only difference is that now you're facing the consequences. Wait, she said, putting her hand on the door. What am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go? I looked at her for a long moment. A month ago, that question would have broken my heart. Now, it just reminded me of how little she'd cared about our marriage when she was busy destroying it. You know what's funny? I said. For months, you acted like I was the worst thing that ever happened to you, like being married to me was some kind of prison sentence. Like my presence in your life was suffocating and clingy and unbearable. I paused, making sure she was really listening. So, congratulations. You're free. No more suffocating marriage, no more clingy husband, no more having to look at my face every day. That's not what I wanted, she whispered. It's exactly what you wanted. You just thought you could have it without giving up the benefits of being married to me. You thought you could treat me like garbage and I'd still be here to catch you when your boyfriend decided he didn't want damaged goods. The words hit her like physical blows. She took a step back, finally understanding that there was no coming back from this. I hope it was worth it, I said, and started to close the door again. Please, she said one last time, don't do this. I stopped and looked at her through the gap in the door. I'm not doing anything. You did this. You made every choice that led to this moment. You decided our marriage wasn't worth your loyalty. You decided I wasn't worth your respect. You decided to throw away 6 years for a few months of excitement. I opened the door wide one last time so she could see me clearly. So, don't stand there and ask me not to do this. You already did this. I'm just living with the results of your choices. The door closed with a solid click, and I heard her footsteps on the porch, getting fainter as she walked away. Through the window, I watched her get into a car I didn't recognize, probably borrowing it from whatever friend had agreed to take her in after her boyfriend kicked her out. As the taillights disappeared down the street, I realized something. For the first time in months, I felt completely at peace. No more wondering where she was. No more lies to decode. No more walking on eggshells around someone who'd made it clear she didn't want me there. She told me to get out of her face, and I'd given her exactly what she asked for. The only problem with getting what you want is that sometimes you have to live with it. 6 months later, I ran into her at the grocery store. She was in the produce section, looking like she'd aged years in the months since I'd last seen her. The confident woman who'd called me clingy and told me to get out of her face was gone, replaced by someone who looked tired and defeated. She saw me first and froze, a bag of apples halfway to her cart. For a moment, I thought she might try to avoid me, but then she straightened up and walked over. Hi, she said quietly. Hello, I replied, continuing to pick out vegetables like this was just another random encounter. You look good, she said. And she wasn't wrong. I'd lost weight, started working out more, and generally felt better than I had in years. Turns out removing toxic people from your life is great for your health. Thanks. How are you doing? She hesitated, probably debating whether to lie or tell the truth. I'm managing. Living with my sister for now, trying to get back on my feet. I nodded but didn't offer any sympathy. She'd made her choices, and now she was living with them. I heard through mutual friends that you're seeing someone, she said, trying to sound casual. I am. I didn't elaborate. It wasn't her business anymore. She stood there awkwardly, probably hoping I'd give her an opening to say more. When I didn't, she took a different approach. Do you ever think about us? About what we had? I stopped what I was doing and looked at her directly. I think about it sometimes. I think about how I spent 6 years building something with someone who was willing to throw it all away for a few months of excitement. Her face fell. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. You got bored, found someone new, and decided I was the problem when I started asking questions. You called me clingy for caring about my own marriage. She looked around nervously, probably hoping other shoppers weren't listening. I made mistakes. I know that now. No, you didn't make mistakes. Mistakes are accidental. You made choices. Every lie, every secret phone call, every night you came home smelling like another man was a choice. I picked up my basket and started to walk away, but she followed me. I learned from it, she said desperately. I'm different now. I understand what I lost. I stopped and turned to face her one last time. You know what I learned? I learned that respect isn't something you can demand. It's something you earn, and you can't earn it back from someone you never gave it to in the first place. So there's no chance, no possibility that we could ever. None, I said firmly. You wanted me out of your face, remember? Mission accomplished. She opened her mouth to say something else, but I held up my hand. Let me ask you something. When you were lying to me every day, when you were spending our money on dates with him, when you told me I was clingy for asking where you'd been, did you ever think about this moment? Did you ever consider that your actions might have permanent consequences? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. You see, that's the difference between us. I think about consequences before I act. You thought you could have your cake and eat it too. And when it blew up in your face, you expected me to be there to clean up the mess. I started walking toward the checkout, and this time, she didn't follow. Have a good life, I called over my shoulder. I genuinely mean that, but have it somewhere else. As I drove home, I thought about the woman I just left standing in the produce section. A year ago, seeing her would have ruined my entire week. I would have spent days analyzing every word, wondering if I'd been too harsh, maybe even considering giving her another chance. Now, she was just someone I used to know, someone who taught me valuable lessons about self-respect and knowing my worth. That evening, I had dinner with someone who actually wanted to be there, someone who answered her phone when I called, who told me the truth about where she'd been, who never once made me feel like caring about her was a character flaw. We talked about our days, made plans for the weekend, laughed at stupid jokes, normal relationship things that I'd forgotten were possible when you're with someone who actually respects you. You seem happy, she said as we cleared the dishes. I am happy, I replied, and realized it was completely true. Because here's what I'd learned over the past year. When someone tells you to get out of their face, when they call you clingy for caring, when they treat your love like it's an inconvenience, they're telling you exactly who they are. And when someone shows you who they really are, the smartest thing you can do is believe them. My ex-wife had spent months making it clear that she didn't want me in her life. She'd gotten angry when I asked questions, irritated when I showed affection, and downright hostile when I expected basic respect. So I'd given her exactly what she wanted. No more clingy husband, no more suffocating marriage, no more having to look at my face every day. The only problem was that she'd expected me to stick around anyway, like some kind of backup plan for when her real life didn't work out. But that's not how respect works. When you tell someone to get out of your face often enough, eventually they figure out that maybe their face belongs somewhere else entirely. And sometimes, when they find that somewhere else, they realize they never want to come back. She'd wanted space. She'd gotten all the space in the world. The fact that it was lonely space wasn't my problem anymore. After all, she was a grown woman. She could figure it out.